Shadow didn't bark. He didn't growl. He just stood there, rigid and silent, like a statue forged from storm and instinct, eyes locked on something Eli Rivers couldn't see. The wind outside the cabin had turned vicious. It howled through the pines and scraped across the windows with claws of ice. Eli had only cracked the door to check the drift on the porch. Barely a second. That's all it took. One gust, one motionless stare from Shadow. Then gone. "Shadow!" Eli shouted into the night, but the blizzard swallowed his voice whole. The German shepherd had bolted, no leash, no hesitation. 10 years old, joint stiff, hip scar from Fallujah still flaring in cold. But the dog moved like he was young again, like his mission had just started. Eli didn't question it. He shoved on his boots, yanked his coat from the peg, grabbed a flashlight and his Glock, just in case. He knew this feeling. Gut level. Old muscle memory. The kind of weight that sat on a soldier's chest the moment something went sideways. Shadow had picked up a trail. Something wrong. The snow slapped Eli's face as he plunged outside. The flashlight beam barely cut through the blur. He followed the paw prints, deep and certain, down the slope behind the cabin, past the frozen well, toward what used to be the neighborhood playground before this part of Colorado emptied out. 30 yards in, Eli slipped once, caught himself. The flashlight flickered, then held. And there was Shadow, at the bottom of the icy slide, unmoving, not sitting, not alert, just still. His body taut, ears forward, tail low, not tucked, not fearful, but braced. Eli's breath caught. He knew that posture. He'd seen it before in collapsed buildings and roadside rubble. It meant danger, or someone in need, or both. "Shadow," he called, low this time, less command, more question. The dog didn't look back. Instead, he shifted a paw forward. Slow, deliberate. That's when Eli saw her. A small figure, curled beneath the base of the slide, wedged into the space where plastic met frost-bitten earth. She was motionless, wrapped in a thin coat soaked through, one shoe missing. Blue lips, cheeks pale as ash, eyelashes frozen together. Eli dropped to his knees, already unzipping his coat, already moving into action. "Jesus," he whispered. Hey, can you hear me?" Her body was light, too light, bones like twigs. He pulled her close to his chest, trying to transfer heat. Her breath was shallow, barely there. Then her lips moved. "I just want to go home." The words were a whisper, a confession, a thread of something deeper than cold. Eli froze. It wasn't just what she said. It was how she said it, like she didn't believe such a place existed anymore. Then she went limp. He didn't wait. "Shadow, go! Go home," he barked. The shepherd spun without question and disappeared into the white blur. Eli pushed himself to his feet, girl cradled tight against his chest. His bad shoulder screamed. Old shrapnel wound flared like fire, but he moved. 1 foot, then another, uphill. No time for pain. The storm didn't let up. It slammed into him from the side. Ice crusted on his beard. The flashlight died. He moved blind, moved fast. By the time the porch lights came into view, golden, wavering, he was wheezing, half slipping with every step. Shadow was already at the door, pawing frantically. Eli kicked it open, stumbled inside, kicked it shut again. The warmth hit like a wall. He laid the girl on the couch near the fire, stripped her coat, wrapped her in every blanket within reach. Hot water bottles, wool throws, hand towels heated in the microwave. He rubbed her hands, her feet, whispered things he didn't remember saying. "You're safe now, you hear me? You're okay. Just stay with me." Shadow stood inches away, tail still, breath steady, gaze locked on her. Minutes passed, then her chest rose, again and again, a breath, then another. Eli sat back on the floor, arms slung over one knee. His pulse hammered in his ears. Shadow lay down beside her, body curled close, not touching, just near enough. The fire crackled. The wind clawed outside. Inside, they waited. Eli looked at Shadow. The dog didn't blink. "What the hell did you hear out there?" Eli whispered. "Whatever it was, you were right." He didn't know who she was, where she came from, what had driven her into that playground in the middle of a blizzard. But Eli had the gut feeling again, deeper now. This wasn't random. This wasn't just a rescue. This girl carried a story that someone wanted buried under snow and silence. And Shadow, old bones, silvered muzzle, quiet eyes, had heard it before she even spoke. That was no accident. That was the beginning. Eli didn't remember how many times he checked her breathing on the walk back. Maybe every 10 steps. Lena. That's what she had whispered before she passed out. Just one word, laced with exhaustion and something deeper. Grief? Resignation? The name of someone who had stopped believing anyone was coming. Now, wrapped in every blanket Eli owned, she lay on the couch near the fire, curled like a comma, so small she barely took up half the cushions. Her lips were no longer blue, but her skin held a pale, waxy tone that worried him. Shadow lay directly beside her, not touching, but near, his eyes trained on every flutter of her chest. He hadn't moved since Eli brought her in. Only his ears twitched from time to time, listening for changes the human ear couldn't catch. "She's stable," Eli muttered, though it was more to himself than to the dog. Shadow didn't blink. Eli pulled the blankets tighter around the girl, adding another log to the fire before sitting on the edge of the coffee table. The storm outside was still wild. Snow lashed the windows, but inside, everything was still. Until Lena stirred. It wasn't much. Just a twitch of her fingers, a subtle hitch in her breath, but Eli sat forward instantly. Shadow rose to a half-stand, ready. When her eyes opened, they were glassy, disoriented, struggling to anchor to the room. "Hey," Eli said softly, "you're safe. You're in my cabin. Do you remember what happened?" Her gaze flicked to his face, then darted toward Shadow. Her body tensed. "He's okay." Eli added quickly, "That's Shadow. He found you. He's ours." That word slipped out before he could stop it. Ours. The girl didn't speak, but her eyes stayed on Shadow now. And when the dog lowered himself slowly back down beside her, she didn't flinch. That meant something. "You have a name?" Eli asked gently. A beat passed, then her lips moved. "Lena," she whispered. "All right, Lena," Eli said, his voice calm, steady. "You're going to be okay." She didn't nod, didn't respond, just sank deeper into the blanket folds. Then Eli noticed something. Her coat, still damp, had slipped halfway off the couch arm, and something had tumbled out of the inside pocket. A small spiral notebook. Frayed, water-stained, bent nearly in half. He picked it up, meaning to set it on the shelf to dry. But something stopped him. The cover had no name, no stickers, just a child's doodle of what looked like a ladder, drawn in black ink with broken rungs. He flipped it open. No hearts, no cartoons. The first page showed a girl in the corner of a dark room, arms wrapped around her knees. Harsh lines formed a door without a handle. Above it, the word "wait" was written in shaky, uppercase letters. Eli turned the page, and another, each one more detailed. A basement cluttered with bags and rusted tools. A mattress on the floor. A faucet dripping into a metal bowl. A closet with something inside. A belt on a hook. Each page was a scream with no sound. He stopped on one. Half finished. A woman's silhouette. Hair in a bun. No face. Just the word "her" written next to it. His stomach twisted. Eli looked up. Lena was watching him, Not panicked, not angry, just resigned, like she already knew what adults did when they saw her drawings. Like she was waiting for the inevitable questions, the disbelief, the "Are you sure?" But he didn't ask. Instead, he crouched next to her and said, "Did you draw these?" She didn't answer, but her hand tightened around the blanket. Eli took a breath. "Is this what happened to you?" Still nothing. But then Shadow moved. He stepped forward, slow and deliberate, not sniffing, not wagging, just approached until his muzzle was inches from Lena's wrist. He gave a low, rumbling breath. Not a growl, not a whine. Something else. Something that vibrated the room in a way Eli couldn't explain. And Lena, slowly, cautiously, reached out and rested her hand on his neck. "He knew," Eli said softly. "Out in that storm, he just knew." Lena didn't say anything, but she didn't pull her hand away either. Eli stood, crossed the room, and poured her a glass of water. When he turned back, Shadow had settled again beside her. Her hand still rested on his fur. When he handed her the cup, she took it with trembling fingers. "You don't have to talk," Eli said, "but if there's someone out there looking for you, someone dangerous, I need to know, so we can keep you safe." Lena stared at the fire. Then, after a moment, she said, "She told me if I ever left, no one would want me." The words landed like weight. "She said I'd come crawling back, that I was nothing without her, that if I told anyone, I'd be locked away." "Who's she?" Eli asked. "My aunt," Lena whispered. "Not real aunt. Just, that's what I was told to call her." Eli crouched again. "Is there anyone else? Parents?" She shook her head. She said they gave me up. Said I was her problem now. Eli's hands tightened into fists against his knees. He'd heard some version of this before, during a deployment in Honduras, in a foster home in Kansas City, even in old case files from his time as an MP. But hearing it from a girl no older than 9, sitting 2 feet from the dog who found her in a blizzard, was something else entirely. Then Lena added, "She said I ruin everything I touch." Shadow made a sound. Sharp, sudden, not quite a bark, not quite a growl, almost like a warning. Eli looked at him. "What is it?" Shadow's eyes weren't on them anymore. They were on the door, and they didn't blink. Eli rose slowly, walked to the window. The snow was too thick to see much, but a shadow moved near the tree line, just for a second. Then gone. He turned back. "We'll figure this out," he said, voice low. He meant it, because Lena wasn't just another lost kid, and Shadow hadn't just led him to her by chance. Something was coming, and this time he'd be ready. The snow had slowed to a soft drift by morning, piling thick and silent against the cabin windows. Outside, the world looked calm, peaceful, but inside Eli's chest, something coiled tighter with every hour Lena stayed quiet. She wasn't crying. She wasn't panicking. She just wasn't there. Not fully. She responded to basic questions. Yes, no, sometimes a nod. But the wall was up. Thick, old, reinforced. Shadow stayed near her constantly, moving only to stretch or drink water. His body seemed to understand what Lena needed better than Eli did. Not presence, not distance. Proximity. Quiet loyalty. By noon, Lena had migrated from the couch to the rug near the fireplace. She sat cross-legged, blanket wrapped around her shoulders, drawing in a fresh page of her notebook. Eli sat at the table behind her, flipping through the other pages. Not out of curiosity anymore. Out of necessity. Each page said something she hadn't. And on one sketch, buried between the others, was something that didn't fit. A cabin. Smaller than his, but similar. Trees in the background. Smoke curling from the chimney and beside it, a dog. Not Shadow. Another German shepherd, younger, drawn with jagged excitement. Underneath the picture, scrawled in crooked lettering, Uncle N. Eli stared at it for a long time. His lungs forgot to work properly. He looked at Lena. She was drawing with her back to him, head tilted in quiet focus. Just like someone else used to, his sister, Clara. He stood slowly, walked to the storage chest by the far wall and opened it. He hadn't touched the contents in years. It smelled like cedar and regret. Inside were old photo albums, a few of his service medals, and a small stack of letters he never answered. One had handwriting that jumped out at him immediately. Curved, rushed, emotional, Clara's. He flipped it open. Eli, if this never reaches you, I understand. I said some things I can't take back. You did too. But I have a daughter now. Her name's Lena, and I don't know what kind of life I can give her yet. Just, if something happens, and you ever hear her name, just know she's mine. She's good, I swear she is. He read it twice, then 3 more times. He sat down on the floor, heart thudding against his ribs like a fist. She said her name was Lena. The math started to work itself out. The letter had no date, but he remembered the argument. 12 years ago, Clara had shown up on his base unannounced, pregnant, alone, angry. They fought outside the barracks. She accused him of siding with their parents, of judging her, of abandoning her like everyone else. He said she was reckless, irresponsible, that she couldn't raise a kid with no plan and no job. She left that night, vanished. Now this girl was in his cabin, and there was a sketch of a dog beside a cabin labeled Uncle N. Lena turned her head just slightly, sensing his gaze. "What's your mom's name?" Eli asked, trying to sound casual. She paused. "Why?" "Just curious." Lena glanced at Shadow before answering. "Clara." Eli felt the air shift. He nodded slowly, working to keep his voice steady. "Did she ever talk about family? About a brother?" "Sometimes," Lena said, her tone guarded. "But she said he didn't want us." Eli winced. She said he picked the uniform over her, that he thought she was a mistake. The words hit like a bullet. Shadow looked up then, his eyes on Eli, quiet but sharp, like he was tracking something invisible in the room. "I'm not him," Eli said, softer now. "At least, not anymore." Lena stood suddenly, backing toward the fireplace. "You don't know me," she said. "You don't get to pretend now." Eli stayed where he was, didn't move toward her, didn't push. "Lena," he said gently, "I think I do know you. I think I've known you a lot longer than you've known me." She looked ready to bolt. Then something happened. The blanket she'd wrapped around herself slipped, catching on her elbow, her shirt lifted slightly. Just enough for Eli to see the faint outline of a mark on her left hip. A birthmark, shaped like a crescent moon, the kind of odd family trait their grandma used to call a blessing from above. Eli had one. Clara had one. And now this girl did too. "Lena," he said, voice catching. "That mark. Do you know what that is?" She looked confused, almost scared. He pointed, careful not to move too fast. "That birthmark, that's from Clara's side. You're not just Clara's daughter. You're family." "My family." Lena blinked hard, then shook her head. No, I'm not. That's not real." "Did she ever tell you about Montana?" Eli asked. "About the field she used to run through barefoot? About the dog named Duke who would chase her and then lick her face until she screamed?" Lena froze. "She told me," she whispered. "She told me that story." Eli's voice broke. "She only ever told that to me." The room went still. Then Lena did something he didn't expect. She turned to Shadow, dropped to her knees, and wrapped her arms around his neck. "Is it true?" she asked him, voice shaking. "Do I really belong somewhere?" Shadow didn't bark, didn't whine. He just pressed his head into her shoulder and let her hold him. Eli knelt nearby. "I didn't know," he said. "About you. About what happened to her. If I had—" "I wouldn't have come," Lena interrupted. She stood, wiped her eyes. Her voice was stronger now, bitter. "Because you would have looked at me like I was broken, like you're doing right now." "I'm not," Eli said. "I'm looking at you like someone I should have found a long time ago." Lena didn't answer. She turned her back, picked up her notebook, and sat down next to Shadow again, resting her head against his flank. Shadow stayed still, like he'd been waiting for this chapter to arrive all along. And for now, Eli let the silence hold. There were no quick fixes, no easy explanations, only truth, and the dog who had found it first. The knock came just after 10 a.m. Not the hesitant kind, not curious or polite. This one had authority baked into it, sharp and rhythmically spaced, like someone used to being obeyed. Eli was drying dishes in the kitchen when he heard it. Shadow had been asleep near the fireplace. At the sound, the dog snapped upright, ears forward, posture tense. Not alarmed. Alert. Lena was at the table, sketching. Her pencil froze mid-stroke. Eli wiped his hands, glanced at Shadow, and nodded. The dog didn't move. He just stared at the door, tail stiff, weight evenly balanced on all four paws. Something was off. Eli stepped to the entryway and opened it a crack. Two figures stood on the snow-dusted porch. A woman in her early 40s, clean-cut, wind-chapped face, holding a clipboard tucked under one arm. Beside her, a man in a deputy's jacket, older, wide shoulders, eyes tired. "Mr. Rivers?" the woman asked. "That's me. I'm Marissa Yates. Child. Protective Services. This is Deputy Clark." Eli nodded. "Come in, but slowly." As they stepped inside, Shadow rose fully. The growl came fast and guttural, low but sharp, like a blade unsheathed. He took 2 deliberate steps forward, placing himself between Lena and the guests. "Easy," Eli said quietly. "Shadow, heel." Shadow didn't budge. His gaze locked on the doorway, body a coil of restrained warning. Marissa's eyes flicked toward the dog, then toward the girl now half hidden behind him. "We received a report," she began, glancing down at the clipboard. "A missing child, Lena Whitmore, age 9, ward of Trish and Marcus Whitmore of Grand Junction. They've claimed she ran away last week during a snowstorm." Eli nodded once. "She didn't run. She survived." Marissa continued. "They've requested immediate pickup. They're waiting at the base of the road, about 10 minutes out. We need to verify identity and return her to legal guardianship pending review." Shadow let out a bark. Sharp, furious, primal. Lena flinched but didn't retreat. Instead, her hand moved to grip the loose fur around his neck. "She doesn't want to go back," Eli said flatly. "I understand," Marissa replied, a voice measured. "But until we investigate, we're required to reunite her with her legal guardians unless there's immediate physical evidence of harm." "She has bruises," Eli said, "and drawings that tell more than any words she's been allowed to say." "Drawings aren't admissible as sole evidence," the deputy said. "We're just here to make sure she's safe. That's it." "She's safe here," Eli shot back. "You can't pull her out of this cabin without due process." Lena's breathing had gone shallow. Her grip on Shadow tightened. The dog didn't move. "She won't talk to us," Marissa said. "We need her to speak for herself." "She only speaks when she feels safe," Eli said, keeping his voice even. "Which right now means not being stared down by strangers while told she's going back to the people who locked her in a basement." There was a long pause. "Look," he said, stepping between them. "Give me 48 hours. I'll provide the evidence. Drawings, Claire's letter, DNA if I have to. Just give her time to breathe. I'm not asking you to bend the law, just to listen long enough to hear the truth." Marissa studied him. Behind her, the deputy looked toward Lena, then at the dog still guarding her like a stone lion. 48 hours, she said finally. But you understand, if she's not here when we come back, this becomes abduction. She's not going anywhere, Eli said, except home. They left shortly after. No promises, no reassurances. Just the kind of bureaucratic neutrality Eli had come to expect in combat zones and courtrooms. When the door closed, Shadow finally exhaled. Eli turned to Lena, who was still frozen, behind the dog. "You okay?" he asked. She shook her head, eyes glassy. "He said," she whispered, "they're going to take me." "Not if I have anything to say about it." "They'll lie," she said. "They always lie." She'll cry. He'll nod. No one ever listens. "I will," Eli said. "They'll say I break things, that I steal, that I make stuff up. And maybe I do sometimes, just to get through it." Shadow nudged her leg gently. She dropped to the floor beside him, pressing her forehead to his. "I won't go back," she said into his fur. "Even if they make me, I'll run again." "No one's making you do anything," Eli said. "You have a voice now, and you have us." Lena didn't reply. But later that night, after the fire burned low and the dishes were done, Eli noticed something strange. Shadow was lying by the front door, not asleep, but still. His head was lifted, ears angled forward, like he was listening to something none of them could hear yet. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. Midnight. And Shadow kept watch. Not just for intruders, for time. Like he was counting down every hour of the 48 Eli had begged for, a sentinel, a soldier. And this time, he wasn't going to let anyone through the door who didn't deserve to be there. The cabin had finally settled into the kind of quiet Eli hadn't heard in years. Not since deployment, not since Clara vanished, not since his whole world shrank down to shadows and static. This quiet wasn't peace. It was the fragile, suspended breath that came before something shifted. The fire had burned low, throwing soft ribbons of orange across the floor. Outside, the wind had died down. No snow, no sound, just stillness. Lena was curled in the armchair, knees pulled to her chest, sketchbook balanced on her thighs. Shadow lay beside her, head resting just under her dangling hand. She scratched behind his ears absent-mindedly, like it was habit now. Eli sat at the table, watching them. The clock ticked over to 12:17 a.m. Then, in the kind of voice that only comes out when the room is still enough to trust it, Lena spoke. "He didn't yell," she said. "Not at first. My mom, I mean. When she left, she didn't cry either. Just packed a bag and told me she wasn't made to be anyone's mother." Eli didn't move. Lena's fingers kept moving gently over Shadow's fur. The dog didn't blink, but his tail tapped once against the wood floor. Just once. Listening. "I waited for her to come back," Lena whispered. "First night I sat by the door. Second night I stopped eating. Third I started talking to the walls, just in case someone heard." She looked down at the dog. Nobody did. Not even when I screamed. Shadow shifted his weight slightly, pressing closer. "But you heard me," she said softly, almost to herself. "Out in that storm, I wasn't yelling then, I couldn't, but you still came." Shadow let out a low breath, almost a sigh. He stretched his paws and closed his eyes as Lena rested her hand on his chest. Eli stood quietly and brought her a cup of warm milk, placing it on the end table. She didn't look up, but her voice followed him as he walked back to the kitchen. "I don't hate her," Lena said. "I just don't understand how she could leave someone that small, that lost." Eli leaned against the counter, his back to her. His hand tightened around the edge of the sink. "She didn't mean to," he said. "She thought she was doing the best she could." She was wrong. That was all Lena said, but it was the most she'd spoken in one stretch since she'd arrived. By 1 a.m., she'd nodded off, still in the chair, her hand resting lightly against Shadow's neck. Eli covered her with a blanket, careful not to wake her. He glanced at the dog, gave a small nod. Shadow didn't move. He just kept watch. It was almost 2 when it happened. Eli had just stepped out of the bathroom, toweling his hands when he heard it. A thump, soft but unnatural. He turned the corner and saw the front door cracked open, snow drifting inside. "Lena." No answer. He rushed forward, half expecting the worst. Then he saw her, kneeling beside Shadow, who lay sprawled in the entryway, motionless. "Shadow won't get up," she said, voice shrill. He just fell." Her small hands gripped his fur, frantic. "Shadow, come on, wake up." Eli dropped to his knees, heart already hammering. The dog's body was warm but slack. His breathing was shallow, legs curled, unmoving. "What happened?" Eli asked, his voice barely steady. "He followed me when I went to pee," Lena said. "He was fine, then he just collapsed. He wouldn't move." She was crying now, no sobs, just wide-eyed tears streaking silently down her face. "You're not allowed to leave," she whispered, pressing her forehead to his shoulder. "You're not allowed to go before I say thank you." Eli checked his pulse. Slow, faint. He felt the chill under Shadow's belly. "He's cold," Eli muttered. "Too cold." He moved quickly, wrapped the dog in Lena's blanket, then his own, hauled him closer to the fire, turned up the heat, pulled the old space heater out of the closet and plugged it in. Lena didn't move from Shadow's side. She curled around him, arms around his neck like he'd protected her from monsters, and now she had to return the favor. "You can't go," she said again, voice low and trembling. "Not yet. Not when I'm finally starting to feel like I belong somewhere." Eli reached for the emergency vet's number. His fingers hit the wrong button twice, hands shaking, breath short. He hadn't felt this helpless since the day Clara walked away from him. The phone rang. "Please pick up." It was nearly 2:30 when Dr. Ileana Ramirez answered, groggy but sharp. "He collapsed," Eli said. "My dog. Service K9. Breathing shallow, no trauma. Just dropped. Age? 10. Breed? German Shepherd. Get him warm. Wrap the paws especially. Keep a steady heat source. I'm on my way. 30 minutes, maybe 40 if the road's bad." Eli hung up. Lena was still there, whispering something into Shadow's ear, over and over. "Stay, stay, stay." Eli joined her on the floor, sat with his back against the couch, hand pressed to Shadow's ribs. The dog was still breathing, but barely. Eli didn't speak. He just kept pressure on the heat pads, checked his vitals every 10 minutes. He glanced at Lena. Her eyes were open, locked on the old shepherd's face. And then, somewhere near dawn, Shadow gave a huff, a shaky, raw exhale that wasn't quite normal but wasn't silent either. His back paw twitched. Lena sat up straighter. Eli leaned in. "Again, buddy," he whispered. "Let me hear it." Another breath. Stronger. Lena gasped. "He's fighting." Eli didn't move, didn't blink, just kept one hand on Shadow's shoulder. The dog's eyes fluttered open, cloudy but present. He saw Lena first, then Eli, and exhaled. Not in surrender, but in answer. He had heard her. He wasn't gone. Not yet. The headlights cut through the gray just before sunrise. They spilled across the snow-covered driveway in 2 wide beams, slow and steady, before vanishing as the vet's SUV came to a crunching stop outside the cabin. Inside, Shadow lay curled beside the fire, wrapped in layers of wool and fleece, his breathing shallow but present. Eli sat nearby on the floor, knees drawn up, arms resting over them. Lena hadn't moved from her spot beside the dog in over an hour. Her eyes were red, but dry. There were no more tears left in her. Just will. Eli opened the door before Dr. Ileana Ramirez could knock. She stepped in without hesitation, carrying a worn leather bag in one hand and a portable diagnostic kit in the other. She was bundled against the cold, hair tied in a knot, expression already calculating as she entered. "Vitals?" she asked. "Better," Eli said. "Still weak. Breathing is thin, but stable. No vomiting. No tremors." Dr. Ramirez nodded, brushing past him, already crouching beside Shadow. "Lena," she said gently, "I'm the vet. I'm here to help him." The girl moved aside just enough to give her space, but her hand remained tangled in Shadow's fur. The vet worked quickly but with care, fingers moving over joints, gently lifting eyelids, checking gums, listening to the heart. "Temperature's climbing," she said. "Still not ideal, but better than I expected. Whatever you did, blankets, heat, proximity, it probably saved him." Lena didn't say anything. She just stared down at Shadow's face. "He's dehydrated," Ramirez continued, "and his joints are flaring from strain. Probably arthritis compounded by shock and exposure. He's old, and his body hit a limit." Eli crouched beside her. "Can he recover?" "With rest, fluids, and some joint support." "Yeah, but no more midnight patrols in sub-zero temperatures. He's got the heart of a soldier, but the body of an old man." A quiet breath of relief left Eli's chest. The vet reached into her bag and prepped an IV with steady hands. Lena watched every movement, hyper-focused, like her presence alone could hold Shadow's heartbeat in place. "Will it hurt him?" she asked quietly. "No," Dr. Ramirez said. "He's tough. He's seen worse." She placed the fourth line with barely a wince from the dog. When it was done, Eli offered Ramirez coffee. She declined, too focused to pause, and stayed another hour to monitor his response. When she finally left, Shadow's breathing was smoother, his eyes closed in sleep, not collapse. Lena still hadn't moved far. Eli watched her for a long moment, then slowly walked to the back room, a room he hadn't entered in years, his father's old study. The air smelled faintly of dust, cedar, and age. He knelt by the old wooden chest near the wall. Inside were layers of forgotten things, field journals, his mother's scarf, a service medal still sealed in plastic, and at the bottom, tucked beneath an old copy of To Build a Fire, was a small handheld recorder. Eli picked it up carefully. It was heavier than he remembered, the kind with a red receive button and a scuffed corner from being dropped one too many times. He hadn't seen it since the day Clara left. He pressed play. Static, then a click, a shaky inhale. Clara's voice emerged, fragile, different from the woman he remembered. Not angry, not wild, just tired. "If this ever gets to you," she said, "I guess I'm gone. Maybe not dead. Maybe just out of reach." Eli stood frozen, the recorder still in his hand. "You never listened to me, Eli." "Not really. You heard orders. You heard duty. But you didn't hear me." A long pause. "I don't blame you. You learned that silence meant control, that pain was meant to be carried, not shared. But I wasn't strong like you. I broke." Lena had stepped quietly into the doorway, barefoot, arms crossed. Clara's voice continued. "But I loved her. God, I loved her. I just didn't know how to be what she needed. I was afraid if I stayed, I'd ruin her worse than if I left. Maybe I did anyway." Eli looked up at Lena. She hadn't moved. The tape crackled. "If I don't make it back, please, Eli, don't let her think she was a burden. She wasn't. She was the only thing I ever got right." Silence again. Then a soft click. The tape ended. Lena's voice broke the stillness. "She didn't hate me." Eli shook his head. "Number, she thought she was protecting you." Lena stepped into the room, eyes glassy. She left. "She was lost," Eli said. "But she never stopped loving you. That much I believe." They stood like that for a while. caught in the quiet. Then Lena asked, almost too softly to hear, "Can I stay here?" Eli didn't answer right away. He looked at her, really looked, and saw not just the weight she carried, but the strength that had somehow survived it. He saw Clara's fire in her posture, her defiance in the way she refused to look away. "You can stay," he said, "as long as you want." Lena looked down, then up again. "I mean, forever." Eli nodded. "If that's what you want, this cabin, this family, me, Shadow, all of it, it's yours." She stepped forward then, hesitant, and placed her hand in his. It wasn't dramatic. No tears, no speech, just contact, just choice. And in the next room, Shadow lifted his head, just slightly, and exhaled, like someone who could finally rest. The courthouse in Pine County looked more like a converted library than a place where life-changing decisions were made. Its old brick walls, tall windows, and rows of creaky benches gave no hint of the weight it held that morning. Eli sat at the front with Lena beside him, her small frame straight-backed in a navy cardigan, fingers gripped tight around her sketchbook. At her feet, Shadow lay still, more still than usual. Not asleep, not tense, just watching. The air was thick with something that hadn't settled yet. Across the aisle sat Trish and Marcus Whitmore. Trish wore a pale suit, her hair pinned back so tightly it looked painful. Marcus slouched beside her, his tie loose, eyes avoiding everyone. Judge Harris entered, stern, silver-haired, no robe, just authority wrapped in flannel and law. He looked tired, but not soft. "This is the custody hearing regarding minor Lena Whitmore," he began, his voice steady. "All parties are present. Let's proceed." Trish stood first. She didn't wait to be asked. "Your Honor," she said crisply, "we took Lena in out of kindness. Her mother abandoned her. She came to us with emotional instability and a history of behavioral issues. We did our best, but she's always been challenging." Lena flinched slightly. Shadow's tail flicked once. Trish continued. "She lied. She stole. She made false accusations. Last month, she hid our daughter's birthday gift under her blanket and pretended she didn't know where it was. We're the ones who suffered through her tantrums, her outbursts." "That's enough," Eli said sharply. Judge Harris raised a hand, but didn't chastise him. He just looked at Trish. "Let's keep this factual, Mrs. Whitmore." "She's manipulative," Trish added, now looking directly at Lena. "She thrives on attention. She turns people against each other. She made up lies about being locked in the basement. We don't even have a basement." Shadow shifted, rising from his position slowly. Everyone noticed. He took a single step forward, placing himself squarely between Lena and Trish. He didn't growl. He didn't bark. He just stood, silent, firm, eyes fixed on her like he could see something no one else could. Trish faltered mid-sentence. "She's a danger to herself," she said, quieter now. Eli stood. "With the court's permission, I'd like to call a witness." Judge Harris nodded. Marissa Yates, the CPS agent who had handled the initial report, opened the side door. A little girl walked in. 7 years old, blonde curls, a nervous twist to her step. It was Sophie, Lena's former foster sister. She climbed into the witness seat, eyes scanning the room before landing on Shadow. She gave him a tiny smile. Shadow blinked, slow and calm. Marissa leaned forward. "Sophie, do you know why you're here today?" "Yes," she said, voice quiet but clear. "Do you remember what happened with the video game last month?" Sophie nodded. "It wasn't Lena. I took it." A hush fell over the courtroom. "I was going to give it back," she added quickly. But Mom got mad first. She said we should say it was Trish's breath caught. "Sophie, no." Judge Harris held up a hand. "Let her speak." She told me to put it in Lena's blanket, Sophie said. She said if Lena looked bad, maybe they'd take her away and we could go back to normal. Marcus's face turned white. Trish stood, voice sharp. She's a child. She doesn't understand what she's saying. She's confused. Sophie looked at her mother, then back at the judge. I'm not confused, she said. Lena didn't do anything wrong. The silence that followed was thick. No gavel, no reaction from the gallery, just stillness. And Shadow, still standing between Lena and the Whitmores, sat. No movement, no noise. But somehow it felt louder than anything that had been said all morning. Judge Harris closed the folder on his desk. This court has heard enough for today. A decision will be made by tomorrow morning. Until then, custody remains with Mr. Rivers. Trish opened her mouth, but the judge cut her off. Further attempts to contact the minor outside official channels will be considered interference. Do I make myself clear? Neither Trish nor Marcus responded. Eli stood slowly, hand resting gently on Lena's shoulder. She looked up at him, then at Shadow. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, she smiled. Shadow looked back at her and blinked. Just once. Like he'd known all along how this moment would play out. Because some dogs don't bark to defend. Sometimes they just stand their ground, and the world listens anyway. The courtroom was quiet. Too quiet for something so final. Dust floated through a shaft of late afternoon light that cut across the polished wooden floor. Lena sat between her attorney and Eli, her hands clenched in her lap, her back straight but her chin trembling. Shadow lay at her feet, his breathing slow, tail occasionally thumping once against the tile like a calm metronome. Judge Harris glanced down from the bench. Her face gave nothing away, but her fingers curled lightly over the edge of her notes. She'd been through pages of testimony, doctors, psychologists, school counselors. Lena had spoken only once, just once, and the courtroom had held its breath for it. The silence was the loudest part. Eli didn't look at the judge. He looked at Lena. He saw the knuckles going white, the lips she tried so hard to keep still. And next to her, Shadow, the dog who wouldn't leave, who had dragged her back from silence again and again, who had stood in doorways, laid outside bedrooms, and one night had found her with a bottle of pills under the bathroom sink. Shadow had known. The judge cleared her throat softly. In the matter of Lena Carter and petition for guardianship, the court finds... Shadow stood. Not barked, not growled. He stood, and every eye turned toward him. Lena's breath caught, but she didn't flinch. She placed a hand on his head, firm, grounding. Her fingers curled into his fur, and he leaned into her touch. Judge Harris paused, blinking once. I was going to say, the judge continued, a thread of something almost human in her voice now. The court finds compelling evidence that Mr. Eli Rivers has provided a stable, supportive, and trauma-informed environment for the minor. Eli's throat tightened. Guardianship is awarded, the judge said, effective immediately. Lena exhaled like she'd been underwater. Eli didn't move, couldn't. For a long second, he was just a man trying to believe the war was over, and this was real. Lena slowly turned to him, her voice soft, almost a whisper, but clear. I want my name to be Lena Rivers. Eli's heart thudded once, then broke open. Shadow shifted, resting his head on Lena's knee. She looked down at him and smiled, that rare, quiet smile that didn't belong to any courtroom or trauma or broken system. You heard me, didn't you? She said gently. Even when I was only whispering. Shadow didn't bark. He didn't whine. He thumped his tail once. Then again. A steady rhythm, not loud, but certain. Judge Harris smiled faintly. You may file the paperwork with the clerk. Congratulations, they walked out together. Eli held the door for her, not out of habit, but reverence. Outside, the wind had shifted, softer now. The air smelled of warm pavement and something else. Maybe cedar from the park nearby, or just the kind of air that didn't carry fear anymore. They sat on the courthouse steps, Lena beside him, Shadow at her feet. "She's your girl now," said a voice behind them. It was Detective Sims. He stood in plain clothes, arms crossed loosely, expression unreadable. There was something in his eyes, though. Maybe apology, maybe respect. "Glad someone did what we couldn't," he added, then walked away. Eli didn't answer, didn't need to. He looked at Lena, who was staring up at the sky like it was the first time she'd seen it without barbed wire in the clouds. "We're not going to be perfect," Eli said, his voice barely above a murmur. Lena shrugged. "Doesn't have to be." Eli looked down at Shadow, who was now lying with his chin across Lena's shoe. "Content. We're a family now," he whispered. Shadow wagged his tail once. Slow, solid, like he'd known it all along. It started with a sketch. Lena sat cross-legged on the porch of the cabin, knees smudged with charcoal, a spiral notebook balanced on her lap. The cabin, old, creaky, still half-dressed in ivy, was barely more than a ranger's outpost tucked into the woods. But to her, it looked like a heartbeat, a beginning. She pressed the stub of her pencil down and drew the outline of the front door, then the slope of the roof, her strokes growing bolder as the idea came to life. Wide steps, warm wood, a sign above the entry that read Rex's house. Behind her, the screen door creaked. Eli walked out holding 2 mugs, steam rising like ghosts in the morning chill. He handed one to her without a word and sat beside her. "You're quiet," he said finally. "I'm thinking," Lena murmured. "What if we don't just fix this place for us?" He tilted his head, waiting. "What if it's a place for kids like me? Like how I was. Somewhere to land when the world knocks too hard." Eli's eyes didn't blink. "You're talking about a shelter." "Not just shelter. Safety, dignity. A place that listens even when no one speaks." Rex's house. The name felt heavy with meaning, but light on the tongue. Eli sipped his coffee, then nodded. Not because he needed convincing, but because he'd already begun to believe in her more than she knew. They started work the next morning. The cabin had been unused since the Rangers consolidated into a newer station closer to town, but the bones were good. The chimney still worked. The walls still stood. The land around it was thick with pine and silence. Word spread faster than they expected. First came a boy named Marcos, maybe 11, maybe 13. It was hard to tell under the bruises and silence. Then 2 sisters from across the state line, one with a black eye, the other refusing to speak above a whisper. A social worker dropped them off, unsure if this place in the woods was legitimate, but too desperate to wait for red tape to say yes. They didn't advertise. They didn't need to. Kids came, not in waves, but in steady drops. Quiet, uncertain, eyes shadowed with things they couldn't name. Lena remembered all of them. She memorized their names, their triggers, their silences. Eli handled the paperwork and legal headaches. The sheriff signed off reluctantly, but never interfered again. Not after Lena spoke at the county board meeting with her new last name and a silent dog sitting at her feet. Shadow. He was aging. His hips moved slower now. His muzzle had gone mostly white. But every morning, before the sun cracked through the trees, he made his rounds. 1 cabin, 2, 3. He never barked. He didn't need to. The kids called it the patrol. Lena had caught one of the youngest, a red-haired boy named Cody, leaving peanut butter crackers by Shadow's bedroll. "He makes the monster stay away," the boy explained, completely serious. That was the thing. Shadow never chased, never growled, never warned. He was just there. There when one of the girls woke up screaming from a dream she wouldn't talk about. There when a boy punched a wall and fell to his knees, sobbing. There when Lena stared at her reflection one night, wondering if she was pretending to be whole. One evening, as the last of the kids went inside for dinner, Lena stayed back and leaned against the porch railing. Shadow was lying nearby, paws crossed, eyes open but unfocused. He didn't get up anymore unless he had to, but he watched. Always. "You tired, old man?" she whispered. His tail thumped once. Just once. "I know. Me too." She looked out across the cabins, the lights flickering on, silhouettes moving past windows, and exhaled slow. She remembered that first night in the forest, barefoot and bleeding. She remembered the heat of gasoline, the stink of fear, the flame that never quite reached her because something had moved faster. Because Shadow had seen her, had chosen her. That's why it mattered. That's why the sign over the main building now read, "Rex's house." Not as a tribute, but as a promise. "You saved me before you ever knew me," she whispered toward the wind. "Now we do the same. One kid at a time." From the far end of the porch, Eli emerged, watching her but saying nothing. She smiled at him. Not big, not wide, but real. "We're not done," she said. He nodded. Not even close. And in the dimming dusk, Shadow lifted his head, slow, deliberate, ancient, and scanned the clearing one more time. No bark, just presence. The sun hung low over the field behind the community center, casting a golden wash over the rustling trees and the scattered kids playing in the grass. It had been 6 months since the trial, 3 months since Lena left the hospital, and just a week since Officer Dana Whitaker officially adopted Shadow. But to Lena, none of that time mattered. Not when she was here, breathing clean air, walking on her own 2 feet, and whispering into a thick coat of black and tan fur. "You hear that?" Lena said softly, kneeling beside Shadow in the grass. The dog's ears flicked at the sound of the breeze, but his body remained still, grounded, present, as always. She leaned closer. "I'm not lost anymore, Shadow." He turned his head slightly, those deep amber eyes locking with hers. There was no wag of the tail, no bark, just stillness and understanding. A kind of quiet only the two of them seemed to share. A boy nearby, maybe 9 or 10, watched from the sidewalk, hands tucked in the pockets of a hoodie too big for him. He wandered over, curious but cautious. "Is that the dog from the news?" he asked. Lena nodded, brushing a blade of grass from her jeans. The boy squinted. "What makes him so special? He doesn't even do tricks or anything." Lena looked down at Shadow again, then back at the boy. Her smile was soft but steady. "Because," she said, "he hears things most adults don't." "Like what?" "Fear. Silence. Things you don't say out loud because no one listens." The boy blinked, unsure whether to be impressed or confused. But Lena wasn't trying to impress him. She was answering the question for herself. In the months after the incident, there had been outrage, yes. Investigations, demotions, one quiet resignation from the precinct's deputy chief. But what lingered most wasn't what happened in court. It was what happened after. The quiet calls to the shelter, the new rules about K-9 retirement procedures, the whispered stories from other kids who began showing up at the center, standing a little too close to Shadow, saying almost nothing at all. Shadow didn't mind. He simply listened. Dana watched the scene unfold from a few feet away. Her badge was off today, civilian clothes, hands tucked into her jacket. There were still hard days. She still saw the ghost of Marcus Gaines sometimes in her sleep, his rage, his breakdown, his confession in court. She still ran the file back in her head, wondering how she missed the cracks in a fellow officer. But here, in this moment, she let it go. Because the girl who'd once laid bloodied and broken on a sidewalk was now laughing. Because the boy with the questions had just crouched next to Shadow and let the dog nuzzle his shoulder. Because sometimes justice doesn't come with fireworks. It comes quietly, with healing, A voice called from the porch. "Snacks are ready." Lena stood, dusted off her knees, and gave Shadow one last pat. "Come on," she said to the boy. "They've got chocolate chip cookies today." He followed, throwing one last look over his shoulder. Shadow stayed put, just watching, just listening. The sun dipped lower. Later, as the center emptied and the light faded into orange, Dana stayed behind. She found Lena again, sitting cross-legged near the garden, eyes closed, her breathing steady. "You okay?" Dana asked. Lena nodded. "Just thinking." "About what?" Lena opened her eyes, looked toward Shadow, sleeping peacefully by the tree line. "About how he saved me without saying a word," she said. "He just stood there and refused to look away." Dana sat down beside her. "You did the same," Lena added. "You listened when others wouldn't." Dana was quiet for a long moment. "We try," she said finally. Lena turned toward the camera someone had left running nearby, part of a small documentary project the center had started. A soft smile played at the corners of her lips. "If you're watching this," she said, "maybe you felt it too. That weight, that silence, that ache of not being heard. But sometimes, it just takes one soul who refuses to look away, whether they walk on 2 legs or 4. She paused, then added gently, "What about you? Has anyone, animal or human, ever heard you when no one else did?" And in the stillness that followed, Shadow opened one eye, then closed it again. Not because he needed to be part of the moment, but because he already was. If this story moved you, share it. Speak up for those who are unheard, and support the voices, human and canine, that refuse to turn away. Subscribe to German Shepherd for more stories that remind us. Sometimes the quietest guardians are the ones who hear the most.